welcome to this Feeling Bad episode of the Maza's Musings podcast. Now, that kind of has a double meaning here. This episode is all about those great bad guys, those great villains of various movies, whether they be action movies, horror movies, those thriller kind of movies, or even your animated movies or comedies. It's all rolled into one into this big bracket format that I do with my good friend, Matt Conway, who is a great movie loving mind. And I'm very fortunate that he comes on here and teaches me a thing or two about movies from time to time. Also, as you can tell from my voice, and you'll hear in this episode throughout, I'm getting over a little something. So, hope you'll bear with me, and I appreciate you, coming along for the ride. Of course, one thing that will never make us feel bad is a joke from Meghan. So here is Meghan's joke of the week. So, do you have a joke for us today?
Yes.
Let's hear it.
What do you call a breadstick with a tan?
I don't know. What do you call a breadstick with a tan?
Toast.
That one I genuinely really loved. That's a great joke. I might have to use that one myself. And, I might give her credit for it, but probably not. Because I like people thinking that I can occasionally be a little bit clever. Anyway, this episode, we live streamed the main topic on Wednesday. So we have a lot to get through. We ended up going long with this one. It's funny how that tends to happen with certain people. Matt's one of them. Greg Cameron's another one when we start talking sports. But it's always a great time. But it does. It runs long sometimes. So I am just not going to waste any more time, and we are going to get right into it. All right. I am here live with Matt Conway from Pop Culture Chats with, is it Ryan and Matt or Matt and Ryan? I feel like I'm constantly getting that wrong.
It's funny. It's Ryan and Matt, and I did this because when we did our radio show in college, it was At the Movies with Matt and Ryan. So I'm like, we got to flip it this time, get our fair equity there.
So on top of Top Rate Podcast, Matt is also a entertainment writer, and also he has his Conway reviews on TikTok as well. But I could talk about Matt as much as I want, or I can have him talk about himself a little bit. So Matt, if you want to reintroduce yourself, some people who have listened to the podcast have obviously heard you before, but in case there's anybody new out there, now's the chance to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I like to stay busy. I'll say that. I wrote at Reminder Publishing for a few years, stuck along as a freelance writer doing dining and entertainment pieces. Had the pleasure to work with Chris and get to know him along the way, and it's always been great to appear on the podcast. I work in government. I coach boys tennis. I review movies. I occasionally fall asleep watching Netflix. So I stay busy.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to do my best. I'll let everybody know I'm playing hurt a little bit today. I've been battling a flu or something like that for the past couple of days. So I'm hoping that my voice will hold out here. So if I sound a little rough or gruff, that's, just because I'm glad that I'm even able to be vertical for this today.
This is going to be inspiring. I texted Chris before this. This is going to be a flu game type performance. I can feel it. You can feel it in the air tonight. It just feels right.
All right, so let's not lay the hyperbole on too thick there. Before we get into our main topic, which of course is we're going to be going through some of the great movie villains of all time. We, of course, have to have our Maza's Mickey Minute. And I've got a couple of things that I'd like to go over that I hope that Matt can indulge me. And I'm gonna pull him in and get some insight from him and some some opinion that may not be entirely popular with those the Disney fans in the audience. I get the feeling.
Meh.
So here we go with Maza's Mickey Minute.
Donald, wake up! It's showtime! Don't forget the orchestra.
Ah, there you are. And just in time.
Mom says there's even more magical stuff now.
For those of you standing, please hold on to the handrails throughout our journey and stay clear of the doors.
Hang on to them hats and glasses, cause this here's the wildest ride in the wilderness.
And here we go!
You know, I think my favorite part of that whole thing is the little part with the little girl, because that's like from a 90s Disney World commercial, TV commercial. And that just brings me back to childhood.
Yeah, I love that. I always love that whole montage. Every time I'm locked into it, and I loved at the end the Disney badge as you're tapping in, starting your day. That's such a vibe right there.
No better sound in the world.
Yeah.
All right. So first off, question, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit with this question, but have you had the opportunity to listen to last week's podcast where I Star Wars-ified, for lack of a better term, the Magic Kingdom?
I have not. I have my long road trip this weekend, and that's when I get in podcast mode. That's when I lock in. So I'm excited to hear your analysis, and can't wait to delve in.
Okay, well, so this, you may be lacking a little bit of context here for some of this, but I actually got some feedback from some friends at some other podcasts who reached out after hearing it and had some thoughts of their own. I had asked people to reach out with any ideas that they had for rides or attractions. I even went so far as transforming Main Street. So first, I would just wanted to go over a couple of these. First was Tom from the Hyperion Adventures podcast, which is a great Disney podcast. One of the first that I started listening to when I started getting into podcasting and podcasts, and I've learned a lot from them. So thank you to Tom and his wife Michelle, who, by the way, congratulations on their 20th anniversary. So one of the things that I looked at was Jungle Cruise, and my idea was to make it so that you were on a riverboat ride, still a riverboat ride, but through the forests of Kashyyyk. And instead of a skipper, the person piloting the boat was Chewie. And he's talking on the radio with, Han and Lando or something like that. And that's where the humor element comes in. So Tom had the idea that the Jungle Cruise could be Dagobah with Yoda.
Ooh, I like that.
The skippers could be the same, but Yoda could chime in with notes and lessons, and the skippers could have fun with that. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a great one too. The other one, another one that I had was for Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and my idea was keeping this kind of keeping with the theme with that ride. They're obviously going for jewels, but we'd take that similar kind of concept, but apply it to kyber crystals. And I was having a hard time. It was just like, well, would they be mining the kyber crystals, or so I didn't have a fully formed idea on that. Mm-hmm. And Tom suggested that it could actually tie into the new Young Jedi Adventures animated show on Disney Plus, mm-hmm. Since the younglings would be the ones seeking out the crystals. And he pointed out that mining them would actually be a bad thing because that was an imperial activity. Mm-hmm. Though we could go that way, but it would have to be a scarier ride.
Yeah, I think you could do something like the Imperials breaching the kyber crystals. You got to escape or something. That's something that could work too.
So those were a couple of great insights from Tom. We also got something from Charles and Pat, who are the hosts of the Conversations podcast, which is a Star Wars podcast that I enjoy. It's really, what I love about that one is it's a totally non-toxic Star Wars environment. And these two guys are just hilarious. So you know how Don Orsillo and Jerry Remy had their thing, and occasionally Jerry would say something and Don would just like start laughing and not be able to stop.
Yeah.
There's a similar dynamic with these guys. So.
Well, I just love the fact non-toxic Star Wars fans. That's such a rarity in our culture today. So I can't wait to listen.
It's really refreshing. What they really do is they dive into different Star Wars topics. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a Wikipedia of Star Wars knowledge in audio version, except, unlike Wikipedia, it's all, well, I assume it's accurate because I don't think that those guys would steer me wrong. Yeah. But anyway, they submitted an idea for the Dapper Droids.
Ooh.
So yellow would be C3PO, blue would be R2D2, green would be D-O, and purple would be R4M7, which is a Legends character, and it was Mace Windu's droid.
The deep cut,
and in this scenario, 3PO would provide the vocals, while the other three provide the harmony, likely much to the disapproval of 3PO. So that was I thought that was a great idea as well. And kind of building off, I had done something with transforming Main Street in and of itself. And so, of course, if there were performing droids on Main Street, that would just tie in beautifully with that as far as I'm concerned.
Love it.
So those were the two. Thank you to them for pitching in. I always appreciate when people reach out with their thoughts and ideas. After you listen to the podcast and listen to that episode, if you have any ideas of your own, Matt, I'd love to hear them as well.
Excellent. I'll hit you up this weekend.
One other Disney-related topic that is unrelated, but I want to run by you. Mm-hmm. Tickets for Revenge of the Sith in theaters. Uh-huh. They go on sale April 14th, according to Regal Cinemas. Had you heard this?
No, I'm very excited for it. I'm very much in line for this. That movie, I came out when I was like 7, so it hit this point in my life where like I saw the first 2 Star Wars in theaters, but I was even more excited, and the nostalgia I have for it, but it's also just a great film and probably the best prequel.
Well, something that obviously we're both looking forward to, but we're going to move on to another Disney-related topic that maybe we're not as hot on, and that is obviously the news has been out there about how well or not well received the new Snow White movie, live-action movie, has been. Mm-hmm. Have you seen this movie?
Yes, I went with my girlfriend and her mother, who are both Disney aficionados. Her mom seemed to think it was okay. Me and my girlfriend both. I don't think we hated it or detested it or anything. It's not like the internet toxicity where there's this like, this is awful, this is terrible. I do think there's some admirable qualities, and they do try to modernize certain aspects of the story in ways that I think have inspiration on paper, but I just think it was very boring and beige. And with these Disney remakes, they're not really bringing a new energy to the table. It's like the same movie, just not animated. And I think the animation has more magic at the end of the day. So I wasn't a big fan.
Now, why do you think Disney keeps going back to this well? They've seen that this is not necessarily all that well received in terms of whether critically or among its target audience, and certainly not at the box office. So what is the rationale behind continuing to pursue this? Is it simply because they have the story already, so they're like step one is taken care of for them?
Yeah, I think part of it is they had a lot of success early on. Cinderella and Jungle Book, and even the awful 2019 Lion King movie, I think all of them made $1 billion at the box office, and same with Aladdin as well. But the last couple years, the movies, I mean, people are starting to wise up to the lack of quality, and it's just people are getting tired of the gimmick of it. I mean, you look at Snow White, it's such a tried and true character, well beloved, established. But this movie just kind of plays to the greatest hits and doesn't really evolve past that. So people at this point are just going to say, I'm going to stay home and watch it on Disney Plus.
Yeah, well, that's probably what I'm going to do. I think that the biggest thing with this one that I'm concerned about, and I'm trying to just reserve judgment, but one of the things that I'm concerned about is the original movie wasn't just Snow White, it was the Seven Dwarfs as well. And so my concern is with those characters. In looking at the footage that I've seen of it, it doesn't feel natural. I like not even getting into what these characters are, and I've seen a couple of spoilers and I'm not going to get into that. But the one thing that I always have a problem with CGI and live action melding is the CGI still has to feel tangible, and it doesn't necessarily. It feels almost like Who Framed Roger Rabbit-esque here, where it feels weird when I'm looking at it. It doesn't feel natural. So I feel like you need to either go one way or the other with it, and this halfway in between just feels weird.
Well, you're very wise with the Force tonight, because your premonition is 100% correct. That is definitely one of the kind of awkward points in the movie. They don't. You said it 100%, nail on the head. They don't feel tangible, and they don't feel like they're even there or present. And they really don't have a lot of screen time. They're kind of just there for their namesake, one trait, and to kind of have a couple moments in the background. So I mean, Rachel Zelgar, I'll give her credit, she does an okay job. I thought Gal Gadot was uninspired, not terrible or anything, but just doesn't bring much to it. And I think this will probably be the movie that Disney's like, all right, let's stop with this. I think this will be the movie where they learn their lesson a little bit.
See, I would have hoped that Aladdin would have been the one that they learned that lesson, but here we are, all this time later. But anyway, I'm trying not to be super negative about it, but was curious to see if you had seen that movie and your thoughts on this continued path for Disney that just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So, anything else Disney related you'd like to add? There's been a ton of Disney news later that I'm not going to get into in this episode, but I'd love to get into in another episode. A lot of stuff going on at the parks that I'm pretty excited about. But I'm almost. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll do a quick plug for this on Disney Plus. Spider-Man Freshman Year. It's like an animated show based in the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko era, like art style, so very like comic booky. One of the best shows I watched on Disney Plus, and honestly, probably the best MCU show since like the Netflix stuff. I loved it. I binged it in like 3 days. So that would be my Disney related recommendation.
Have you seen any of the new Daredevil?
No, I need to watch season 3, but I'm very excited about it because I think Charlie Cox was the quintessential Daredevil and mastered the character. And I'm really curious to see how they kind of infuse the Netflix story roots with kind of a new version. So that'll be interesting to watch.
All right, so that will do it for this Maza's Mickey Minute.
Well, I can't do any more damage around this popsicle stand.
So long, partner.
See you real soon.
Well, actually, Mickey will not be seeing me anytime soon. Well, I mean, at least not at the parks, and that might be a good thing with the number of updates that are going to be happening in 2025 and 2026. So we're going to be on a cruise in 2026. So it's not like we're not going to see Mickey, but I'm looking forward to some of the updates that are coming up that, it may be some disruptions in the park beforehand. So maybe it's not a terrible thing that I'm not going back for a couple of years now.
I agree. You'll see it bright and beautiful and brand new with so many new things. So that'll be cool.
All right, so we're going to get into our main topic. And of course, being in the midst of March Madness, we do, of course, have this in a bracket form. And the main idea here was taking a look at some of the best bad guys, basically, in cinematic history. Now, this isn't every, that would be a much longer list. This is already a long enough list. But we basically broke it down into a few different categories, and the categories are a little different than what I started out with. Mostly because there were certain genres that I haven't seen a lot of movies in, like horror, for example. I've seen some of the classics, in terms of that genre, but not enough to fill a portion of a bracket. So some of them are kind of interspersed in some of these other categories. So basically, there's like a action adventure category, which is kind of a broad category. There's dramatic villains, and that's more your psychological thrillers or things like that, or people whose villainy is more cerebral, I guess, than a physical presence, or the movie may just not have the same kind of action that some others do. Animated villains and comedy villains. So we kind of broke this up so that each of these categories is a separate region in the bracket. And for the most part, I randomized the seating for these, but then I allowed myself to have 3 that I could move around if I felt that someone was really out of place. So with that said, before we get into the whole thing, and I'm not going to go through the entire list because we're going to go through it in the bracket.
Yeah.
Were there any major objections or hangups that you had with the list or any of the seatings?
I just want to say I think the NCCA or NCAA should take notes on how to make a bracket. We're in March. Maza puts in the homework. He goes through. He gets the analytics. I think you have a great cross section of villainy. The cartoonish buffoons, the menacing, murdering characters. The complete twisted psychos who leave you chilled from one scene to the next. So I give you your flowers. You did a great job.
Oh, thank you. And honestly, I'm never quite sure when it comes to these movie topics, because I will readily admit that I'm not a regular moviegoer, so I base this a lot off of, everybody who's in this list is something that I've seen. Mm-hmm. But some of these I may have only seen once, so my impression of them may be different than, or my recollection of them may be different. The other kind of interesting thing with this was some of these characters, we've had several iterations of various things, like whether it be Batman or Superman, or there are some titles where we've had different directors taking different takes on them, which means different takes on the villains. So in some cases, there's a very specific movie that I'm thinking of, and then in other cases, it's more general. So I kind of left this as flexible as possible, and I'll readily admit that I kept my decision making on this as flexible as possible too. So the way that I measured one may not line up with the way I measure the next one in the next matchup. So
I think that's what makes it fun, and that's what March Madness is. It's about the upsets. It's about the Cinderellas, more like the Maleficents in this case. But
all right, so let's get started. We're gonna start off with the action adventure bracket, and then the first matchup was Hans Gruber from Die Hard and Gollum from Lord of the Rings. Do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, this is a great battle. Die Hard, an instant classic, obviously, but I'm going with Gollum. I think he changed the game because of one of the great examples of how a CGI character was integrated in live action. And he's just so creepy and menacing, but also so pathetic at the same time, and you kind of feel bad for him. So that was my pick, but a great start to the tournament.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this one a lot, and I think I just ultimately went with Hans Gruber, mostly because it's kind of a throwaway line in the movie. But this is a guy who got excommunicated from a terrorist organization. So thinking about that, and then the lengths that he went to in this movie to just pull off a robbery, it all like. With that little piece of context, it makes everything kind of fall into place a little bit more. So I went with Hans Gruber. So we've got a difference of opinion right off the bat. This time, as opposed to our last bracket, I'm actually taking notes so that I remember what you picked too. So,
Perfect.
So we're going to move on to the next one, so that I'm not going, wait a minute, which one did you pick again?
I got my notes here too. So
the next one is Thanos versus the Predator.
Oh, I gotta go the Predator, 100%. That 87 movie is one of the all-time greats. The ultimate macho man action movie that turns into this complete descent into horror, the ultimate hunt. And I just love how versatile the character is. I mean, you can have something like Prey, which came out in 2022, where the Predator is in Native American times. And then you can have a movie like the 2010 one where he's on a native planet, and then the 92 one or whatever when he's in the hot LA sun. So he's just always great.
Yeah, I agree. And you talk about just the perfect, vision of a bad guy. I mean, this is like the perfect costuming, the perfect kind of setup for, for your classic 90s action sci-fi bad guy, 80s, 90s, whatever, so we both went with the Predator there.
Nice.
So the next one was the T-1000 from Terminator 2 and Commodus from Gladiator.
I'll let you lead off with this one.
So I went with the T-1000 simply because there's a feeling of inevitability with that character. It's like as the movie goes on, it's becoming more and more clear that it feels like there's no stopping this villain. So that I mean, just that relentless kind of nature to it, I think just struck a chord with me. And I think that the Commodus character is there's a lot of little boy throwing a tantrum with it.
Joffrey from Game of Thrones type stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So I went with T again from Terminator. I think the character is the ultimate manifestation of not only in the 80s and 90s, but just now our general kind of angst and somewhat paranoia and distrust of technology. So I think that part of it is always fascinating, but obviously the ultimate, killer, the ultimate Robert Patrick in T2, just classic in every way.
All right, so next we've got Mr. Joshua from Lethal Weapon and Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm Street. I went with Freddy Krueger just because, it's basically one of those names that's synonymous with the genre, so, you see, even to this day, Halloween costumes, and that alone makes it just one of those classic villains. And, I think that as far as, Gary Busey playing the bad guy with a little bit of a crazy streak, there's few better, but, but just looking at the legacy of that Freddy Krueger character, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, the concept of you can't hide from him in your dreams and you're just kind of locked there, I think is so terrifying, and that's why he's resonated with so many. So I also went with Freddy Krueger.
All right. So for the next one, we have Agent Smith from the Matrix movies. And so this one's specific. Captain Hook from the Steven Spielberg movie, Hook.
Oh, okay. I went with Agent Smith, the ultimate manifestation of conformity. Just this menacing presence who, like we've talked about with some other characters, just never stops the chase. So gotta go with Agent Smith.
Yeah, I went with Hook here basically because Dustin Hoffman brought so many layers to this character. I thought that it was a well-written character, and Dustin Hoffman's performance in it was just terrific. So I went with that, which I think is a mild upset.
I like it. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't seen Hook, and my girlfriend's been begging me to watch it, and now I think this is the exclamation point that's gonna get me to watch it.
It's an underrated Spielberg movie.
Nice.
All right, but also young Julia Roberts is in it playing Tinkerbell.
Oh, very cool. And I know,
Yeah.
Robin Williams too. That's definitely a goated cast.
All right, we've got a couple of comic book movie villains here.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Killmonger from the Black Panther, and we've got the Joker. And this one is non-specific. It's just the Joker in whatever Batman movies he may have appeared in.
Yeah. So Killmonger, obviously a great character, but the rich history with the Joker. My personal favorite being Mark Hamill in the animated series and also in the Arkham Asylum games. It's just hard to beat. It's, kind of a stacked deck there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the different people who have played this role, and you can see all the different ways that you can take it, and I think that there's, again, there are layers to that character, and there are different ways that you can go with it, and I think that that's what makes it so intriguing. And you can really say that about a lot of, I think, especially DC characters, like the villains tend to actually be a bit more interesting than the heroes themselves. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, they're definitely a bit more menacing. Like the Marvel villains, they're all very like colorful and like got Dr. Octavius. He's like an octopus with his 8 arms. They lean into this kind of colorful superhero facade where DC, there's some really menacing people. Like Darkseid's like, I want to destroy the whole galaxy. Like they don't play around at DC.
All right. So next we have another comic book villain matchup. We've got Magneto and Lex Luthor.
Another great one. I think, Lex Luthor, Magneto, both very suave, but I got to go Magneto with the powers. And he is the true intellectual equal to Professor X, where Lex Luthor, he's always losing to Superman. He never really gets to hang in the ring unless he gets that cheat code kryptonite there.
Yeah, I agree that I think that the back and forth there with Professor X and the real, like, the personal connection there adds intrigue to that character. I think that, and I'm also going now into, which I guess is cheating a little bit, but thinking about like not only like the comics, but the animated series, and even like X-Men '97. I think that adds, again, a layer. That there's genuine, not only respect but love for each other. That really clouds everything that they do, even the villainous aspects of what they do. And I think that also it's intriguing in the sense that he's not doing villainous things to be villainous. It's because he sees a different path, Yeah, it's just I think a different and in some ways refreshing kind of villain.
I love the pick. So who we have next?
Next, we've got Dennis Nedry from Jurassic Park, and Michael Myers from the Halloween movies.
This one was so good that I wrote one and then crossed them off to write the other because Dennis Nedry is just such an annoying character, and it's so delicious to see him get his comeuppance. But I went with Michael Myers, kind of like we talked about with Freddy Krueger, just kind of quintessential horror, his kind of menacing presence always looming. So I went with Michael Myers there.
Yeah, I did the same. I almost went with Dennis Nedry here, partially because it's just like the dude was just like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to let dinosaurs loose in the park to eat people because I want money. Like, and that's basically what it came down to was he felt he wasn't getting paid enough. And so he found somebody who was going to pay him more. And it didn't matter who was between him and that money.
Yeah.
If didn't matter who was going, it could have been one of Hammond's grandkids and it didn't matter to him.
100%. He's the ultimate man of capitalism.
All right, so that's it for the first round of the action adventure. Do we want to finish off the bracket for that and then move on to the next?
Yeah, let's do that. I think that's a good way of going about it.
Right.
For my next one, I have Gollum versus the Predator, and I took the Predator in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I had Hans versus the Predator, and I also went with the Predator. I don't think that there was any contest there.
Yeah, for sure. Hans, I will say, was probably the hardest round one omission I had to make. Such a great character.
One of the things that I love about that Hans Gruber character is there was also a nonchalance about, like he's at the beginning of the movie, he's talking with Takagi about suits, about designer suits and stuff like that, like before he's gonna try to rob him and then ends up shooting him in the face. So it's kind of just things like that lean into the idea of what a sociopath this guy is,
Yeah.
how he can compartmentalize these things.
I had for my next one, the Terminator versus Freddy Krueger. I think we had the same there. I took the Terminator personally.
See, I took Freddy Krueger basically for the same reason as before. I think they're both iconic characters, but when you're looking at in that franchise, people think of, if you were to say something about Terminator, the T-1000 is not the first thing they think of,
Yeah.
It's one of, but obviously the Arnold Schwarzenegger character, who is also a villain in the first one, trumps. So I went with Freddy Krueger.
You just changed my mind. Great case, Freddy Krueger. Upset special. Next, I had Agent Smith versus the Joker, and I took the Joker.
I took the Joker as well. Again, just the ways that you can go with that character. I mean, you look at, I just think of Jack Nicholson's Joker and Heath Ledger's Joker and how memorable both of those characters are, but for very different reasons.
Yeah. Next, I had Magneto versus Michael Myers. I think this might be an upset, but I went with Magneto. I just love his backstory. It's so rich and emotionally complex. And I love the different iterations. I mean, obviously, Ian McKellen was excellent, but Michael Fassbender, especially in X-Men First Class, was really excellent. So,
yeah, I had the same thing, and I'm getting a little scared here because we've got the same thing, and that didn't happen very much in our last bracket.
Yeah, I think it might change for the future ones. I'll have some upsets in there for sure.
All right, so next we had
Predator versus Terminator, and you had Predator versus Freddy Krueger, correct?
But you changed yours to Freddy Krueger.
Yes, I did. You're right. I was just reading my notes. So we both have Predator versus Freddy Krueger. I'm gonna go with the Predator again. He's the man.
Yeah, I had the same.
Perfect.
No
And then
notes.
Joker versus Magneto. I think this is a great battle. And I think we will have a diversion here because I'm going to take Magneto still. I think ultimately I kind of lean towards the power factor and Magneto be able to control metal and stuff. It's like Joker's creepy, weirdo. It's cool, but man, be able to control metal, it's just like such an overpowered thing.
Yeah.
So I took Magneto.
Yeah, I went with the Joker. I think that there's a power to being able to manipulate people's emotions as well, and I think that the Joker does that well. So that's why I went with the Joker.
Great pick. So then we have Predator, and I have Magneto, and you have the Joker. And if you're making Arnold run to the chopper, you're really a great villain. So I'm going with the Predator.
Yeah, I originally had the Joker here, but the more as I've been thinking about it and we've been talking through this, I'm doing a cross out here, and I'm going with the Predator.
Let's go! I love it. Right now, we should do the Predator moment with Arnold and Carl Weathers.
It wouldn't be nearly as impressive. All right, so do we want to go on to we can either go animated or we can go comedy next.
Let's do animated because that's
Animated.
such a rich category.
All right, so for the first one for animated, we've got Scar versus Hades. Both Disney villains, classic Disney villains.
I just think the Scar murder is one of the most terrifying scenes ever, and it's such a menacing moment for a Disney character. I gotta go Scar.
See, this is an upset for me, especially because in the Disney bracket, I chose the Lion King as my number one overall. Mm-hmm. But I'm picking Hades here. I just love I love that character. I think that there's such a great blend of menace and humor to him, just the right amount of snark and really, I mean, you think about the plot that he's laid out there with that really comes down to first victimizing a baby, and I went with Hades.
I love it. It's one of Disney's best, I think, character designs.
All right, so next we've got Sid from Toy Story and Warren T. Rat from An American Tail.
Honestly, Sid, he kind of benefits from Toy Story's animation not aging the best, where he looks so dead inside and soulless, where he creeps me out more today than he did when I was 5 or 10. So I got to go with Sid.
See, I give Sid a little bit of a pass because he's a kid.
Yeah, that's fair.
Meanwhile, you've got Warren T. Rat, who's literally a cat disguising himself as a rat so that he can extort the mice. That's a villain to me. So I went with Warren. So we're already diverting more than we did on the last one.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got the Queen from Snow White and Mother Gothel from Tangled.
I went with the Evil Queen, a close call for me, but I just went with the kind of pedigree of the history there. So
I went with the Evil Queen. Mother Gothel, while there's some serious toxicity there, there's a serious codependent relationship going on there, and some serious emotional abuse. The Queen wanted to cut out a 14-year-old girl's heart and have it brought back to her in a box.
Yeah, that's different levels.
All right, so next we have the Giant Magnet from The Brave Little Toaster, which was one of my childhood favorite movies, and Judge Frollo from The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
I went Judge Frollo. I love that he's probably one of the Disney villains I feel is most grounded in kind of the real world history of the setting he's in and everything. And I love his music numbers, and I'm pretty sure Jeremy Irons was the voice. It's just quintessential and so menacing. So
yeah, I mean, this is one of those classic person in power, who's corrupt and but also feels validated in his corruption. So I went with Frollo as well. Though, just even today, imagining that giant magnet going around the dump looking for these the toaster and his friends, it just still puts a pit in my stomach.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got Jafar and Sharptooth from The Land Before Time.
Two good ones. I went with Jafar. I love his flair, and I just think he's a great foil to Aladdin. So
yeah, basically it came down to Sharptooth isn't necessarily evil. It's just he's a carnivore, so he's doing what he's supposed to do. So Jafar, on the other hand, well, what you said.
yeah.
All right, so then we've got Syndrome from The Incredibles and Lord Farquaad from Shrek.
Two great ones. Lord Farquaad, to me, he has more of that kind of like meme status. Syndrome is a great villain because you see that initial like hope and desire to do great, and it's kind of one of the few missteps of the hero, like kind of shuttering him aside, and the villain becomes the creation of the hero's mistake. So I kind of love that juxtaposing angle there.
Yeah, I went with Farquaad too. This is another one of those, powerful people, corrupt powerful people who feels vindicated in doing what he does. And Syndrome, as you said, this is you almost sympathize, in a way. So I went with Farquaad.
I respect it. We disagree that because I would take Syndrome just because of that aspect where it's like you have that emotional investment because you're invested in kind of his downfall a little bit. But I think two great quintessential animated characters there.
All right, so the next one, Ursula versus Cruella de Vil. Both Disney, female Disney villains again.
I went with Cruella de Vil. I like the different layers of the character. I actually did like the live action movie they made a few years ago, the Emma Stone, but also Glenn Close a couple of decades back was excellent. I love her flair. And to hate on dogs, I mean, that's the most wicked thing imaginable. So
yeah, I'm going to agree with you on Cruella moving on here, but disagree with you on the reasoning. Okay. I am basing my moving on solely on the original 101 Dalmatians. I never saw the Glenn Close movie, so I'm throwing that out. That's not part of my judgment here. Mm-hmm. As far as I'm concerned, this is one of those things where we don't need a backstory that introduces some kind of gray. This is a woman who is willing to club to club puppies so that she can have a coat. That to me is just flat out evil. And we have to get used to the concept. And this is one thing that I think Disney trips on sometimes. Is it's okay that sometimes there are just plain evil people in the world. And it's okay for evil people to just be evil. I did see the Cruella movie, and I didn't think it was a bad movie. But you honestly could have taken that whole concept and everything and put a different name on the character, and it still would have worked as a movie.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair.
So, all right. So the last one in this first round is Gaston and Maleficent.
I had to go with Gaston. Such flair, such bravado, such ignorance, and I love his song. So Gaston for me.
Yeah, I went with Maleficent. I mean, cursing a baby because you didn't get invited to a party is just, that's next level evil as far as I'm concerned. Gaston is simply self-involved, and while that leads him to do some dastardly things, he's he's honestly in a lot of ways run of the mill.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I'm excited for this bracket because we're gonna have some big divergence here, which will be really good. So for the first round of the next the suite or the 32, we have Scar. I have Scar versus Sid, and I think we have a difference here, correct?
Yes.
So I had Sid moving on over Scar.
Wow.
Yeah, I think Sid like torturing toys, like it's just such a maniacal thing, and the twisted creations he has of his own toys. It's like the mind of a complete devil. So I went with Sid.
I'll never get over that one of them, like the one with the fishing pole with legs.
Mm-hmm.
That he literally built a hooker.
That's a good. I never thought of that.
So I had Hades versus Warren T. Rat, and I went with Hades moving on. I just think that the bravado of that character and the just the attitude that he brings really adds an entertainment value to the menacing side of him as well.
Great pick.
So we both had the same for the next one, I believe. Yes, we both had the Queen versus Frollo.
Yep. I took the Judge. I think there's just a little more emotional texture there. And like I said previously, I like the real world kind of setting with the character. So
I did the same for basically the same reasons.
nice. So I think we have a difference here. I took Jafar versus Syndrome. I went with Syndrome. Again, I can't help but feel bad for him, but I want to add this. I love his costume. I just love his look and everything. It has that kind of hero vibe, but also it has that cape, and we know you don't want to have one of those.
I was going to say that the costume was great up until the cape.
Yep.
Okay. I had Jafar versus Farquaad, and I went with Jafar. I just think between those two, on top of trying to force marriage on Jasmine, and I mean, granted, his main motivation seems to be greed, which seems like a pretty standard and not very deep motivation. I think that the live action one tried to make it a little deeper. Didn't do a great job of it, but I think between those two, I'd still choose Jafar.
Good pick. Good pick. Next, I think we had we had a difference here. I had Cruella de Vil and Gaston. I went with Gaston because of that signature flair, and I like that you pointed out he is kind of menial in that sense. So there really is nothing fantastic about him. He's very much just someone driven by his own arrogance and bravado. But I feel like he wears it with such a color and such a deliciously kind of menacing vibe that I can't help but be entranced by.
Well, and you could also say that, the argument against my argument too can be that it makes him a very relatable villain.
Yeah.
Everybody's experienced someone like Gaston in real life too. So
yeah.
So I had Cruella and Maleficent, and I picked Maleficent. As much as I love puppies, I feel like cursing a baby trumps the puppies.
Great. Yeah. So for our Sweet 16, I have Sid versus the Judge, and I went with Sid yet again. He still creeps me out. Like I just look at him and I'm like, I want to put my Paddington doll in like a security box somewhere where he can't be found. So he's just so menacing.
And I'm looking back at this now, the reverence that you have for the Toy Story movies, I guess this shouldn't be a surprise to me, but it has taken me a bit by surprise, especially because I know how much you enjoyed the Hunchback of Notre Dame from our last bracket that we did.
Yeah, it was a tough pick for sure.
I went with Frollo in this one.
Mm-hmm.
I just, for a lot of the reasons we've already we've already talked about. I had him going up against Hades, and I think that he does just have a little bit more of that real world. I think the word you used was grounded, villainy to him. So I went with that one.
Nice. And I have Syndrome versus Gaston. A very close call for me, but I went with Gaston. I think part of Gaston is he just benefits from Beauty and the Beast being such a fantastic movie, too. He's like a role player on a championship team almost.
All right. So I had Jafar and Maleficent, and I again went with Jafar.
Nice.
On top of everything else, that like I keep thinking of like dastardly things that he's done. He could have just straight up just killed Aladdin once he had the genie.
Yeah.
Instead, he sends Aladdin to go freeze to death. So it's these little things that it's just like there's a way that this could have been done where, but everything that he does kind of like is made to add either pain or humiliation to everyone who opposes him.
Yeah, I love the analysis of your villain rankings. You really got those nuances, those specific nuggets that really make it stand out. So get your Pop-Tarts ready because Sid is moving on to the final four. Yeah, I had to go with him.
All right, and that was Sid over Gaston, correct?
Yes, for me.
All right, so I actually had, and it's funny because this is a movie that I did not enjoy as much as the other one, but I had Frollo over Jafar, making it to my final four.
Excellent.
All right, so now we've got. I'm going to pick now. We're going to go on to, comedic villains.
Yes, this was my favorite category.
So first we have Dark Helmet from Spaceballs versus Bill Lumbergh from Office Space. Two very, very different kinds of villains.
This was definitely the hardest pick for me. I went back and forth. Spaceballs was a fan favorite as a kid. I have to go Bill Lumbergh. He's just so relatable and it's just so specific yet so universal. And I just love the performance of that character.
I went with Dark Helmet here. Spaceballs is not only like one of the classic spoofs. By the way, I recently finished Mel Brooks's autobiography, which was great. I can let you borrow it if you're so interested. Oh, no. And I found myself reading it I was reading it in Mel Brooks's voice in my head.
He really does have that quintessential presence about him, where
the way it's written, it's written very conversationally, so like that it lends to that. But anyway, so Dark Helmet is just one of those quintessential comedic villains to me. I do love the Bill Lumbergh character. I feel like this is a tough out for him.
Yeah.
Tough first round matchup. I especially love, anytime that that something doesn't go his way, he turns around and then abuses Milton. You know?
Poor Milton.
Milton gets the last laugh.
Yeah, true that.
All right. So the next one we have White Goodman from Dodgeball and Sack from. Excuse me, I've lost my place here. Apologies. Sack Lodge from Wedding Crashers.
I love both. I think Dodgeball for me, it just came out the perfect time in my life. And it's just such a quotable movie to me. Nobody makes me bleed my own blood. He's just such a deliciously evil, almost like an 80s movie villain, always in his luxuries, but so kind of empty in his heart.
I went with Sack Lodge here, simply because I don't know. I think the White Goodman character, as much as yes, he's got some great quotable lines and everything, which is usually a good barometer for this. He
Yeah.
felt almost a little too cartoony for me,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I guess a lot like Gaston, Sack Lodge just felt much more very relatable. So I guess I'm contradicting myself a little bit with the way I didn't have Gaston move on, but I'm having. I think that has more to do with the matchup too.
I respect the pick.
Okay, so we've got Biff Tannen from the Back to the Future franchise and Judge Smails from Caddyshack.
I gotta go with to Biff. I mean, he sucks when he's old. He sucks when he's younger. It's just he's always a jerk. So I went with him.
I went with Judge Smails, simply because he's that quintessential, for the goofball comedy, he's the quintessential, stuck up, rich, white bad guy.
Yeah, the perfect foil.
All right, so in the next one, we've got Prince Humperdinck from The Princess Bride and Shooter McGavin.
I gotta go with
Happy
Shooter
Gilmore.
the Man. Him running away with the jacket and getting chased. I just think that's one of the great comedy scenes, and I just love. He does feel like almost a real character in a way where it's like I could totally see this guy in the golf rounds and talking smack and just being super arrogant.
Yeah, I went with this. I went with Shooter as well, basically because he's another guy who's got all those quotable lines, but like you said, he feels more relatable, more real than say a White Goodman.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so next we have Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers movies and the Wet Bandits from Home Alone.
Similar to the Bill Lumbergh round, I think this is one of the toughest outs. I had to go with the Wet Bandits though. What a quintessential name. You get two for the price of one. I mean, you got to go with the value there. And I just love the rapport between both of them, and I think it shines in both of those Home Alone movies.
Yeah, I went back and forth on this one too. I did end up going with the Wet Bandits as well, for a lot of the same reasons. I think that the chemistry between those two actors was great and really made that work.
Yeah.
All right, so next we have Ernie McCracken from Kingpin and Regina George from Mean Girls.
This is a movie where a pick where I definitely show my age because Mean Girls, another movie that kind of just came out at the perfect time in my life. But similar to Bill Lumbergh, Regina George, such a encapsulation of annoying things we know about people. We definitely knew this person in high school, so that's why I went with Regina.
This is another one that I went back and forth on, and I almost picked Regina George for a lot of the reasons you did, but I ended up going with Ernie McCracken.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, just more along like the storyline. Like this is he's the classic womanizer. He ultimately gets our main character. Our main character loses his hand. He's a bowler who loses his hand by getting it stuffed into a ball return because this guy basically ditches him after convincing him to hustle these guys. Yeah. So that just the whole storyline of this movie focuses on how this guy's just terrible actions set this main character down this terrible road.
I like the pick.
All right, and we've got Edgar, also the Bug in Men in Black, and we have Ed Rooney from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I went with the Bug. I just love the character design of it. It was something similar to Sid. It was something that creeped me out as a kid, but it almost creeps me out more as an adult. And a great example of practical effects really doing the job.
Yeah, I went with this too, for the reasons that you mentioned, and also because I don't consider Ed Rooney to be the villain of that movie. The villain of that movie is Ferris Bueller. Ed Rooney was doing his job trying to make sure that kids were in school.
Yeah.
And Ferris Bueller's a punk who should have gotten what was coming to him.
I love
Said
that.
what I said.
That was a great take.
All right, so the last one in our opening round here is Judge Doom from Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Hedley Lamar from Blazing Saddles.
I went with Judge Doom. Roger Rabbit, just one of my favorites, so I had to lean with my preference of movie there.
Those literally piercing eyes and the high voice certainly make him a formidable villain. But I went with Hedley Lamar. I think that this was more just Blazing Saddles being a movie that I really loved, even in my formative years. It was one of those movies that I put on with my dad for the first time, and he was like, shit, I didn't remember that part. So, and there was a lot of that. But so this was more just a feel pick for me than anything else.
I love it. I got to watch that. I literally haven't seen it since I was a kid, so maybe one of these days soon.
All right, so the next one we differed here. So I had Dark Helmet versus Sack Lodge. As far as I'm concerned, it's no contest. It's Dark Helmet. Yes,
I love the pick there. I would have went the same with those two. I had Bill versus White. I do. Joni loves Chachi when he hits Justin Long with the ball. There's so many good quotes, but I went with Bill. Similar for what you mentioned with not picking White last round. He is very much a cartoon where Bill, that he's the king of passive aggressiveness, and he wears it well.
All right, for the next one, I had Judge Smales versus Shooter McGavin. I went with Shooter McGavin. It's funny, these two golf movies, two golf villains, but I ended up going with Shooter McGavin. I think that there's more of a dastardly side to him, whereas there's just more of a sense of entitlement from Smales. Yeah. So
I had Biff versus Shooter, and I also went with Shooter, similar for the reasons I mentioned last round.
All right, so next, you had the Wet Bandits and Regina George.
Correct, and this one I really wrestled with, but I went with the Wet Bandits mainly because Joe Pesci, I mean, one of the great cinematic villainous presence in Hollywood, but to see him, kind of play in the slapstick mold, it's so funny. Like, it's just an instantly kind of funny, image. And it's just it's really the reason I think Home Alone is special all these years later.
I had, I had the Wet Bandits versus Ernie McCracken. I picked Ernie McCracken again for basically the same reasons that I stated before. Mm-hmm. I think that this is an underrated Bill Murray role. I really do. If you haven't watched it recently, go back and watch it. This is, it's really one of those things where there was probably a lot of cocaine involved, but it was definitely one of those things where I feel like he really sunk his teeth into the role and let his hair down and had some fun with it.
I'll definitely give it a rewatch soon. My last round, I had the Bug versus Judge Doom. I give Vincent D'Onofrio this. He terrifies me in Full Metal Jacket, but the Bug, there's just something about the look with him. It just like, oh my God, like the gross slobber and just how like kind of deformed he is and how he talks. It's just such a great performance by D'Onofrio.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there would have been anyone better to pull off if you were to say to somebody, act like you're a giant bug who's been crammed inside the skin of a person. Like, I don't think anybody could have pulled that off better than he did. So I also went with Edgar there.
So then I had Bill Lumbergh versus Shooter McGavin. A close call, but I went with Bill. I just love every time he hears something he doesn't like, before he has his snide remark, he just kind of goes, and like just makes that like face. Like there's so much specificity to that performance by Gary Cole, and like every wrinkle of it, I think is just so hilarious.
So I had Dark Helmet versus Shooter McGavin. I went with Dark Helmet. I just, as from the opening scene there, and it's just the ridiculousness of all of this just becomes so incredibly clear with, like, I mean, the size of the helmet and the way that they're willing to just openly, I mean, it's a spoof, so obviously you're going to be making fun of your subject material, but I mean, when you look at, if you were to subjectively look at Darth Vader without knowing the story and everything like that, it's kind of a goofy looking villain. And so they took that and turned it to 11 with Dark Helmet. So Dark Helmet is my pick there.
I love the pick. He's the only villain who's watched himself in his own movie, so that's a special achievement right there. My last round, I think I had the Wet Bandits versus the Bug, and I went with the Wet Bandits. So I had Bill Lumbergh versus the Wet Bandits there.
And I had Ernie McCracken versus Edgar the Bug, and I went with Edgar for all of the reasons that I've already said.
Mm-hmm. So for my final four pick, I have Bill Lumbergh. Moving on. If he makes you work on a Saturday, I think there's nothing worse that could happen to me. So Bill Lumbergh making me work 8 hours, 8 a.m. on a Saturday. Come on, man. That's not right.
All right. So for my last one, I had Dark Helmet versus Edgar. I went with Dark Helmet. This is just, I'm just going to flat out, it's a, I'm just picking it over one movie over the other. I really enjoy every time that I watch it. You talk about quotable movies and quotable characters, Dark Helmet is it. So
yeah, he was definitely the toughest admission for me, because I feel like if he's on the other side of the bracket, he might have even reached the finals here with Bill Lumbergh. So such a great character. Rick Moranis really at his best.
All right, so the last category we have is dramatic villains, and there's a little bit of crossover. None of these are perfect in terms of categories, but I think that it's pretty well.
I like how you calibrated this one.
All right, so the first we have Annie Wilkes from, excuse me, I'm just scrolling on my list, from Misery. And we have Pennywise from It.
I went with Pennywise, has had multiple good iterations, and I think the way the character really captured the zeitgeist was quite impressive, so Pennywise.
Truthfully, I've just never gotten the whole It thing. Mm-hmm. It just never spoke to me. Annie Wilkes, however, that is a stomach-turning character for me. So that she moves on there.
Nice.
So the next one is Mr. Potter from It's a Wonderful Life. And Norman Bates from Psycho.
I went with Norman Bates, again, similar to Joker, a character who has a very rich history between the obviously Psycho. Bates Motel, the show, actually had a well-respected run. And you know what? I'm going to defend Vince Vaughn. He wasn't a bad Norman Bates, so that's my pick right there.
I went with Mr. Potter. You just look at, I think that's a character whose villainy resonates even today. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who was, to get what he wanted, was willing to essentially get a man thrown in jail and his family on the streets.
Yeah.
Simply because he was looking for control, and the thing standing between him and control, he was willing to do whatever to get it out of the way.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And for I know that again, I'm contradicting myself that his main motivation was greed.
Mhm.
But the execution of this, I think, is something that you look at certain aspects of today's culture and current affairs, and it still speaks.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so next we've got William the Butcher Cutting from Gangs of New York, and Hans Landa. Oh, excuse me, no, Little Bill Daggett from Unforgiven.
I went with The Butcher. Gangs of New York, not my favorite Scorsese movie, but I think that character is really what makes the movie worth watching almost. Like it's by far the best aspect of it.
I had the same.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that character it was really well done and really makes what was an otherwise lackluster movie watchable.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the next one was Alonso from Training Day and Hans Landa from Inglorious Bastards.
This is an all-time great battle. I went with Alonzo. I just love how he wears the badge. He's supposed to represent the ultimate model of public service and good, and he's the exact opposite of it. And he wears his kind of villainy until the bitter end. And one of the great all-time rants from a villain.
So I went with Hans Landa. This is a character that even putting the Nazi Association aside, there's just such a calculated nature to him. And not only is there the calculated nature, but he also takes real pleasure in what he does.
Yeah.
So I went with Hans Landa. Mind you, I also so one of the other villains in this was, and his name's escaping me. Someone that I was considering for this bracket was
Mhm.
From Schindler's List, but I decided that actual Nazis was like that would trump everything. So
Yeah, true.
I omitted I omitted that from my list.
That's fair. That's fair.
Okay, so next we've got John Doe from Seven or Voldemort.
I'm gonna go with John Doe, just the perfect execution of a plan, and it's so like he just doesn't care about anything but the plan, and there's something like the commitment to that is almost admirably sinister. So
Yeah, there's also the righteousness he sees in the plan.
yeah,
But the one of the things that I think that makes it really effective is so much of this movie you don't actually see him, but he's such a menacing presence throughout the movie, without having much screen time at all.
yeah.
All right, so next we've got Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Jack Torrance from The Shining.
I went with Jack. I mean, just again, the indelible moments in cinema history, and Jack Nicholson at his best.
Yeah, between these two, that there's just there are just some images in cinema that that stand out, and that's one of them.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got Hannibal Lecter and the Wicked Witch of the West.
This was a really tough one. I went with Hannibal. Obviously, both have an illustrious history on the silver screen. I think Hannibal's is a little deeper, though. I think the Hannibal show with Mads Mikkelsen that came out on NBC is one of the best things that has ever come out on like cable. And I don't know how it did because it's such a violent and like sickening show at times, but such a great villain.
So I will readily admit that I have, believe it or not, I've never seen The Wizard of Oz from start to finish.
Oh, wow.
I've seen the entire movie.
Yeah.
I've never seen it from start to finish. So that colors my decision here. But I think that Hannibal is just a better villain.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got Frank Costello from Departed and the Nothing from The Neverending Story.
I went with Frank. I just love Jack Nicholson, and it's a movie made up of so many like legendary actors, just kind of like operating in their element. You got Marky Mark doing his tough Boston cop thing and all this and that. I just think the element that Nicholson adds, just kind of the mania and craziness in his villainy, and ultimately what you find out about him. I think he's a great character.
I went with the Nothing. Again, this is another one though. It's not a there's no physical manifestation here, but it's just a force that feels inevitable, and as the movie goes on, you feel the dread of this building and building. So I think when you can have a villain that that you never actually see, basically the one close thing that you see to it is the wolf that's like his doing his bidding.
Yeah.
I think that says a lot. It like basically just like the villain is the idea of the Nothing.
I think playing off
and I
like
think
the
that's a
fear of the
really
unknown is
cool
great.
concept.
Yeah, that's really great. So I think we're on to our sweet or 32 now for this side of the bracket. I had Pennywise versus Norman Bates. Give me Norman Bates in a blowout. Just a way more interesting and complex character.
I had Annie Wilkes versus Mr. Potter, and also a blowout Annie Wilkes.
Nice. Next, I had The Butcher versus Alonzo. Give me Alonzo all the way. Just like an amazing Denzel performance.
All right, I had The Butcher versus Hans Landa. I went with Landa for a lot of the same reasons I already mentioned. This one was tougher, but I always come back to there's a certain amount of pleasure that he takes in the work, and I think that adds to the sinisterness.
Yeah,
sinister nature. I don't know if sinisterness is a word.
It might be. Let's get that style book out. What did you have for the next round?
So I think we had the same thing, John Doe and Jack.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually went with John Doe. This was another tough one, but I think that I just watching Seven and watching that performance, it still makes me very uneasy.
Yeah, I will agree. Like I said earlier, just the excellent example of someone following through with their plan. So next, I had Hannibal versus Frank. I took Hannibal in a blowout.
Yeah, I also took Hannibal over the Nothing. I don't think that there was any contest there.
Yeah, I had for the Sweet 16, Norman Bates versus Alonzo. Two, some incredible performances all around. I went with Norman Bates. I think what Hitchcock did with that character, I think defined or helped define villainy for decades to come.
So I had Annie Wilkes and Hans Landa. Look, Nazism trumps here. That's basically what it comes down to.
So I think that we had the same matchup. I think the next round.
Yep.
I
John
took
Doe versus Hannibal.
I took Hannibal yet again, just because similar to kind of the Joker, that depth of history from literature to film to TV. So I went with Hannibal.
Yeah, I went with Hannibal as well.
Very nice. And then my finals, I had Norman Bates versus Hannibal. Two obviously classic characters. I went with Hannibal just because. Give me Mads Mikkelsen over Vince Vaughn. That'll be the tiebreaker.
All right, so I had Hans Landa versus Hannibal. I went with Hans Landa. As iconic as that Hannibal character is, again, it comes down to when I'm watching it, who's making me more uneasy. And for
Yeah.
me, that's that Hans Landa character.
Very nice. So I'm so excited for this. Our final fours. I have Sid versus Hannibal and Predator versus Bill Lumbergh. So I'll go first. I have Sid moving on to the title game. I think he would almost be like, I think even Hannibal might be like, man, you're a lot. He almost feels like Hannibal in training or something, you know?
All right. All right. So I had the Predator versus Frollo, and I am going with the Predator. Such a menacing, such a menacing villain. Someone who, on top of everything else, was able to cut through commandos. Until of course he came across Arnold, but you know, and really they exhibited such. Honestly, what came down to fear was, I think, the biggest thing that they felt themselves being hunted. And as that reality set in, I think you as an audience member feel it too.
I also had the Predator making the championship over Bill Lumbergh. Just such a well-versed character, because there's every aspect of him is menacing. He has all the tech. He has the instincts of a great hunter, and the heroes in these Predator movies just can never get a grasp of him. He's always like an enigma, and that kind of makes him even more menacing.
Yeah, I wanna back up. I misspoke. I said Predator versus Frollo. I meant Predator versus Helmet.
Mhm.
But it was the same thing. I was just looking ahead and misspoke. So sorry about that. All right, so who have you got on the other side?
So I have my championship is Sid versus Predator, and I am taking the Predator. Again, similar to some of the other characters we talked about, a great history, feels completely impervious. I mean, he beat the alien. He fights with Wolverine in the comic books and Batman, and he's gonna fight Spider-Man in the comic books this month, Chris. So he just fights everyone. He's the ultimate baddie, and I just love every kind of specific detail of him. It's such a fascinating character.
All right, so I had Frollo and Hans Landa, and I went with Hans Landa.
Nice.
So
I think that's a great pick. That you can't really go wrong with your logic there.
all right, so wrapping this up. Man, it's the Predator, right?
Yeah, it's my pick 100%. I feel like you just came out of the timeout of the flu game, and you're about to hit the crossover game-winning jumper.
Man, this ended up going longer than I anticipated. But thanks for taking the time to go through this. It's funny because I was just like, I'm going to make this bracket smaller than we did the last time, and then I just kept thinking of characters, and I was just like, I can't leave this one out.
Yeah. I think you did an excellent job yet again building an interesting kind of eclectic blend of villains, and we got to really explore the different types of villainy. So I think that was really fun, probably for the audience too. And you can't really go wrong with any of the characters I think we had finishing high up in the charts. I think the Sid pick definitely is going to be controversial. I'm excited to see what the Disney files think of that one.
All right, sir. Well, thank you very much. If you want to let people know where they can find you and what is coming up for you, either in your podcast or elsewhere, fire away.
Yeah, you can follow Pop Culture Chats with Ryan and Matt on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, any of those podcast services. We just recorded this evening a MLB episode. We did it with our friends Nick and Connor, who are both New York fans, so there's always a kind of goofy rivalry there. But we'll be talking a lot about summer movies and big Marvel news and all sorts of things. And we definitely need to have a great Star Wars show in our near future with one Mr. Chris Maza.
I'll look forward to it. All right. Well, hey, thanks for taking the time tonight, and I'll talk to you soon.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Well, we certainly made our way through a lot of bad there, but you know what's one thing that never has to be bad? That's your next Disney vacation. You know how you can prevent it from being bad? You can use We Do Travel Right. We Do Travel Right will offer that concierge level service with the one-on-one service of an agent and all kinds of other tools like the dining team. The agent's going to help you with all of your reservations. You will get information on how to manage the ins and outs of the parks and how to use the apps. And if you're doing the lightning lanes, whether they're lightning lane multipass or individual lightning lanes or the lightning lane premiere, I think they're calling it now. Whatever you're doing, they can help you navigate it all so that you can just get back to enjoying your vacation. And the best part is it's all free. Whether you're working with Disney, whether you're working with Universal, whether you're working with a cruise line or an all-inclusive, We Do Travel Right works with them all. And I learned something interesting recently. Just by happenstance, I learned that they can also help you with European trips. So if you've got a European trip planned, they have an expert for that too. And wherever you're going, using We Do Travel Right is free because all of those companies that you'd be traveling through or traveling to build the use of an agent into their pricing already. So you are paying for the use of an agent, whether you are using the agent or not. So doesn't it just make sense to use the agent? So if you are interested in getting your next magical vacation started today, go to wedotravelright.com/Maza. That's wedotravelright.com/MAZA. And they will help you get started. And don't forget to tell them that Chris Maza sent you. Well, we made it. The marathon movie villain bracket is now over. Honestly, just like the last one of these that I did with Matt, really his pick, his winner, really was a big surprise for me, especially with how many quality characters there are here. Just astounding to me. But anyway, I appreciate you coming along for the ride. I would love to hear who your favorite movie villains are. I know that there are some that were not included in this list. We had to cap it off somewhere. But I would love to hear what you have to say. If you'd like to do the bracket, I'll put the bracket up on our social media as well, so you can play along if you'd like. Or if you just have an idea on someone who you're just like, this one's the best, I'd love to hear it. And you can reach out via social media. We're at the Maza's Musings Podcast on Facebook. We're at Maza's Musings Pod on Instagram, Threads, and X, formerly known as Twitter. We're also on TikTok at Maza's Musings Podcast, and we are on Blue Sky. You can find all of that information, plus a lot more about this podcast, and find past episodes and all kinds of other stuff on our website, which is mazasmusings.wordpress.com. While you're there, you can also sign up for our newsletter. And with the newsletter, you'll get information on upcoming episodes, past episodes. We shout out other podcasts. We'll also tell you about different sweepstakes or things that are going on that may be of interest. They're interest to me, so hopefully they'll be of interest to you if you're listening to this podcast. And you can find that link right there on our website. You can also go to our linktree/Maza's Musings to find that and all of the other places where you can find us on social media or different podcatchers. Additionally, if you would like to support us, we would love it if you could send us a rating or a review on whatever podcatcher it is you use, because those ratings and reviews help bump us up in whatever the algorithms are that make it easier for people to find this podcast. And when people are presented with it more readily, it really just helps us grow this little community that we're building. So much appreciated if you've done that already. If you have not done that, please consider doing it. Of course, also when you're interacting with us on social media, that helps make us more visible to people. Truthfully, there are people that I know who are far more skilled at this social media thing than I am, and I constantly ignore their advice. But if you are doing that, I appreciate it. And if there is something you'd like to do a little bit more to help support us, you can buy us a blue milk. You can go to our website and click on the link that's there, and it will take you to where you can buy us a blue milk, which is essentially just a little way that you can help us with some of the small costs that go into running this podcast. However you are supporting us, very much appreciated. I love that you guys are here. I love that you are listening. I love that I am connecting with you in some way. It really, that's the whole point of this, right? Is to connect people together, and podcasting is a great way to do that. And so any way that you want to contact us, any way you want to connect with us, if you have an idea for a podcast, if you want to collaborate, we'd love to hear all of it. And as always, until next week, I hope you have a great weekend and a great one.